A German shepherd refused to give birth. Then the vet checked her belly and froze. At first, it seemed like a normal emergency, but what they discovered inside this dog was anything but normal. A terrified animal fighting for her life. A vet who suddenly realizes the truth is far darker than anyone imagined. And behind it all, a force willing to do whatever it takes to keep that truth hidden. What was really inside her? Why was she never meant to survive? And when the secret finally comes out, who will pay the price? This channel isn't just about stories. It's about holding on to what still matters. Empathy, truth, love, and the courage to care. The flickering fluorescent lights of the veterinary clinic cast long shadows across the empty hallway as Clara Jennings finished her evening rounds. Her footsteps echoed against the linoleum floor, accompanied only by the soft hum of medical equipment. At 11:30 on a Tuesday night, she expected nothing more exciting than updating patient charts and preparing for tomorrow's appointments. A sudden scratching sound from the back door made her pause. Clara turned, her heart skipping a beat. The noise came again, more insistent this time. Moving cautiously toward the door, she peered through the small window. There, illuminated by the security light, sat a German shepherd. The dog's sides were heavily swollen, and her dark eyes held a desperate intensity that made Clara's chest tighten. Without hesitation, she pushed open the door. "Hey there, sweet girl," Clara said softly, crouching down. The dog didn't move, but her tail gave a slight wag. A metal tag glinted on her collar. Just 2 characters, Z6. Clara's trained eye could see immediately that the dog was heavily pregnant and appeared overdue. As she gently coaxed Z6 inside, she noticed the dog's labored breathing and the way she moved with obvious discomfort. "Let's get you checked out," Clara murmured, leading Z6 to an examination room. The dog followed willingly, though her steps were slow and careful. Under the bright exam lights, Clara's concern deepened. Z6's belly was distended more than typical for a pregnancy, and despite clear signs of being past her due date, she showed no signs of going into labor. Clara reached for the phone and dialed Dr. Dreyfus's extension. After 3 rings, his tired voice answered. "Dr. Dreyfus? I'm sorry to bother you, but we have an emergency case. A pregnant German shepherd was just abandoned at the back door. Something's not right." She heard him sigh. "Clara, if it's just a pregnant dog, monitor her vitals and call me if she goes into active labor." "But, sir," Clara persisted, watching Z6 struggle to find a comfortable position on the floor. "She's clearly overdue, but there are no signs of labor starting. Her belly seems unusually distended and her breathing is labored. I really think you should take a look." "You're being overcautious again," Dr. Dreyfus replied dismissively. "Just keep an eye on her. I'm finishing up important paperwork." Clara hung up the phone, her jaw tight with frustration. She'd been a veterinary nurse for 5 years, and though she might not have Dr. Dreyfus's decades of experience, she knew when something was wrong. Z6 looked up at her with those soulful eyes, and Clara felt her determination strengthen. Kneeling beside the dog, Clara ran her hands gently along Z6's sides, noting the muscle tension and unusual firmness of her abdomen. The dog leaned into her touch, seeking comfort. "Don't worry, girl," Clara whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." Over the next hour, Clara monitored Z6's vital signs, growing increasingly worried. The dog's temperature was slightly elevated, her heart rate faster than it should be, yet still, no signs of labor appeared. She called Dr. Dreyfus twice more, each time trying to convey the urgency she felt. "Dr. Dreyfus, please," she said during her 3rd call. "Her vitals are getting worse, and something about this pregnancy doesn't feel right. I've assisted with dozens of dog births, and this is different." She heard papers shuffling on his end of the line. "Clara, you're letting your emotions cloud your judgment. Sometimes these things just take time. Sir, with all due respect, this isn't about emotions. This is about medical concerns." Her abdomen is too firm, her breathing is getting more labored, and she should have started contractions hours ago based on her condition. The silence that followed felt endless. Finally, Dr. Dreyfus spoke, his voice carrying a note of resignation. "Fine, I'll come take a look. But if this turns out to be nothing—" "Thank you," Clara said firmly, ending the call. She turned back to Z6, who had settled her head on Clara's lap. "Help is coming, sweet girl. We'll figure out what's wrong." As she waited for Dr. Dreyfus, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Z6's story than an abandoned pregnant dog. The single tag with just a number, the unusual symptoms, the way the dog seemed to trust her despite clearly having been through something traumatic. It all added up to something darker. "I promise," she whispered to Z6, gently stroking the dog's head. "Whatever's going on, I'll help you through it." The German shepherd's eyes met hers, filled with a trust that made Clara's heart ache. Whatever it took, she would make sure this dog and her puppies survived the night. The clock on the wall ticked steadily as they waited, each minute stretching out like an hour. Clara knew that every moment mattered, and her instincts screamed that something was dangerously wrong with Z6's pregnancy. She just hoped Dr. Dreyfus would finally see it too when he arrived. The clock ticked past 11:30 as Clara knelt, beside Z6's trembling form. The German shepherd's dark eyes held both trust and pain, her swollen belly rising and falling with labored breaths. Clara gently stroked Z6's head, feeling the rough patches where scars interrupted her fur. "Dr. Dreyfus, please," Clara called out again as the veterinarian passed by the examination room. "Something's really wrong. She should have gone into labor hours ago." Dr. Malcolm Dreyfus paused in the doorway, his silver-rimmed glasses reflecting the harsh overhead lights. He looked tired after a long day, his white coat wrinkled from countless examinations. "Clara, sometimes these things just take time." "No," Clara insisted, her voice firm but respectful. "Her temperature dropped yesterday. She's been nesting. Everything indicates she should be in active labor, but nothing's happening. Please, just one ultrasound?" The veteran doctor sighed, rubbing his temples. "It's late, and we've already done 2 checks today." "Look at her eyes," Clara pressed, gesturing to Z6's face. "She's in distress. This isn't normal anxiety. Something feels off about this whole situation." Dr. Dreyfus studied the German shepherd for a long moment. Z6 whimpered softly, pressing closer to Clara's gentle touch. Finally, he nodded. "Fine. One quick scan. Then we all go home." Clara helped guide Z6 onto her side while Dr. Dreyfus wheeled over the ultrasound machine. The gel was cold against the dog's fur, causing her to flinch slightly. Clara whispered, soothing words, keeping one hand firmly on Z6's shoulder. The room filled with the whooshing sound of the ultrasound as Dr. Dreyfus moved the probe across Z6's abdomen. Clara watched the grainy black and white images on the screen, counting the familiar shapes of puppies. Suddenly, Dr. Dreyfus's hand froze, his face paled. "What is it?" Clara asked, her heart beginning to race. "What's wrong?" The doctor adjusted the probe slightly, his expression growing more concerned. That's impossible." Clara leaned closer to the screen, squinting at the images. Among the organic shapes of the developing puppies, she could make out sharp geometric forms. They were clearly solid, clearly metallic, and clearly not. Supposed to be there? Are those... Clara couldn't finish the question. "Metal objects," Dr. Dreyfus confirmed grimly. "Surgically implanted by the look of it. This wasn't an accident, Clara. Someone put those there." Z6 whined, as if understanding the gravity of their discovery. Clara's hand trembled as she stroked the dog's fur. "Who would do something like this?" Dr. Dreyfus straightened up, his professional demeanor taking over despite the shock in his eyes. We need to prep for emergency surgery immediately. Those objects could rupture the uterine wall at any moment. No wonder she hasn't gone into labor. Her body's trying to protect itself from severe internal damage. Clara was already moving, gathering surgical supplies with practiced efficiency. Her mind raced with questions, but she pushed them aside. Right now, Z6 needed her focused and calm. "I'll call Dr. Patterson for backup," Dr. Dreyfus said, reaching for the phone. "We'll need an extra set of hands for this." Clara nodded, her attention fixed on Z6's trusting face. The German shepherd's eyes never left her, filled with a quiet desperation that broke Clara's heart. "It's going to be okay, girl," she whispered, though her voice shook slightly. "We're going to help you and your babies." The examination room quickly transformed into an emergency surgical suite. The harsh lights seemed brighter now, more urgent. The mystery of who had done this to Z6, and why would have to wait. Right now, survival was all that mattered. As Dr. Dreyfus prepared the anesthesia, Clara couldn't shake the image of those cold, metallic shapes nestled among new life. What kind of person would use an innocent animal this way? The contrast between the precious puppies and the cruel intrusion of metal made her stomach turn. "Clara," Dr. Dreyfus called, pulling her from her thoughts. "Are you ready? Are you ready?" She met his eyes and saw her own determination reflected there. Whatever darkness had brought Z6 to their door, they would fight to save her. Clara squared her shoulders and nodded. "Ready." The clock struck midnight as they began final preparations for surgery. In the sterile quiet of the clinic, Clara silently promised Z6 that she would see her through this crisis. The German shepherd's life and the lives of her unborn puppies now depended on their skill and speed. The mystery of the metal fragments would soon be revealed, but first they had to ensure there would be survivors to tell the tale. Dr. Malcolm Dreyfus sighed heavily, running his hand through his graying hair. "Fine. Let's do an ultrasound, but I'm telling you it's probably just delayed labor." Clara helped guide Z6 to the imaging room, whispering soft encouragements as the dog limped alongside her. The German shepherd's trust was evident in how she leaned against Clara's leg, seeking comfort. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, Clara carefully positioned Z6 on her side while Dr. Dreyfus prepared the ultrasound machine. As the cold gel touched Z6's swollen belly, she whimpered softly. Clara stroked her head, watching the black and white screen intently. At first, the images showed what they expected, the shapes of puppies waiting to be born. But then something unusual caught Dr. Dreyfus's eye. He froze the image, leaning closer to the screen. "What? What is that?" Clara pointed to strange angular shapes among the puppies, geometric forms that had no place in a living body. Dr. Dreyfus's face drained of color. "Those are not natural formations." His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "We need to operate, now." The next hour was a blur of activity as they prepared for emergency surgery. Clara's hands shook as she helped set up the operating room, her mind racing with horrible possibilities. Z6's gentle brown eyes followed her every movement, filled with a trust that made Clara's heart ache. Under the bright surgical lights, Dr. Dreyfus made the first incision. Clara assisted, her training taking over despite her racing heart. As they worked deeper, what they found made bile rise in her throat. Scattered among the puppies were small packages, carefully wrapped in waterproof material and surgically attached to Z6's tissue. "Oh my God," Clara breathed, horror and fury mixing in her voice. "They used her as a smuggling mule?" Dr. Dreyfus worked quickly, his experienced hands removing each package while taking care not to harm the puppies. "Narcotics, most likely." This is beyond anything I've seen." His voice was tight with controlled anger. "Clara, we can't speak of this to anyone. The people who did this, they're dangerous." But Clara couldn't contain her outrage. "We have to report this. Look what they did to her." She gestured to the countless small scars they'd discovered, evidence of multiple surgeries. How many times did they cut her open? How many times did they force her to carry their drugs? Lower your voice, Dr. Dreyfus hissed, glancing nervously at the windows. These aren't people you want to cross. We'll remove the packages, deliver the puppies, and forget what we saw. Clara stood her ground, even as she continued to assist with the surgery. I won't pretend this didn't happen. Z6 deserves justice. They worked in tense silence, carefully removing 7 packages before focusing on delivering the puppies. 4 tiny lives came into the world, each one a miracle considering what their mother had endured. Clara cleaned them with shaking hands, checking their vital signs while Dr. Dreyfus finished with Z6. As the sun began to rise, casting long shadows through the clinic windows, Clara sat beside Z6's recovery kennel. The mother dog was groggy from anesthesia but alert enough to nurse her puppies. The sight of her caring for her babies, despite everything she'd been through, brought tears to Clara's eyes. I won't let them hurt you again, she whispered, reaching through the kennel bars to stroke Z6's soft ear. I promise I'll protect you and your babies no matter what. Z6's tail thumped weakly against the blanket, her eyes filled with a trust that strengthened Clara's resolve. The packages sat locked in Dr. Dreyfus's office safe, a dark secret waiting to be addressed. But for now, Clara focused on her patients, monitoring their vital signs and ensuring their comfort. Her mind was already forming plans, weighing options, determined to find a way to bring Z6's abusers to justice while keeping her safe. The morning sun continued to rise, illuminating the recovery room with warm light. Clara watched as Z6 tenderly nuzzled each of her puppies, her maternal instincts unblemished by the cruelty she'd endured. In that moment, Clara's purpose crystallized. She would be the voice for this voiceless victim, no matter the personal cost. As Clara finished bandaging Z6's surgical site, the clinic's front door chimed. Through the glass partition, she saw a tall man in an expensive charcoal suit striding purposefully toward the reception desk. His polished appearance seemed out of place in the humble veterinary clinic, especially at this hour. I'm here about my German shepherd. His voice carried clearly through the quiet space. She was brought in last night. Clara's hands stilled on Z6's fur as the dog's entire body tensed. The German shepherd's ears flattened against her head, and a low whimper escaped her throat. Dr. Dreyfus emerged from his office, adjusting his white coat. I'm Dr. Dreyfus, and you are... Raymond Holtz. The man extended a manicured hand, flashing a brilliant smile that didn't reach his cold eyes. I run Holtz Premier Kennels just outside the city. One of my breeding dogs went missing yesterday. A female German shepherd. Clara's heart pounded as she instinctively positioned herself between Z6 and the window. In the adjacent recovery kennel, the puppies slept peacefully, unaware of the growing tension. Ah, yes, the pregnant shepherd, Dr. Dreyfus said carefully. She was found abandoned at our back door. We had to perform emergency surgery. Holtz's smile faltered slightly. Surgery? What kind of surgery? Before Dr. Dreyfus could respond, Eli Turner appeared in the hallway. The former Marine often helped with morning kennel duties, and his timing couldn't have been better. His broad shoulders filled the doorframe as he assessed the situation with quiet intensity. There were complications. With the pregnancy, Dr. Dreyfus explained, choosing his words carefully. The puppies are doing well now, but we found some unusual items during the procedure. Holtz's expression hardened. I see. Well, I'll need to take her and the pups home immediately. I have all her registration papers here. He reached into his jacket pocket. That won't be possible, Clara spoke up, her voice stronger than she felt. She's just had major surgery. Moving her now would be dangerous. Holtz turned toward her, his eyes narrowing. And you are? Clara Jennings, veterinary nurse. She met his gaze steadily, though her pulse raced. Z6 needs at least 72 hours of post-operative care. Z6? Holtz's laugh was sharp and without humor. Her name is Duchess, and as her owner, I'll decide what's best for her. Clara felt Eli move closer, positioning himself near her and Z6. The dog pressed harder against her leg, trembling. "Mr. Holtz," Dr. Dreyfus interjected, "perhaps we should discuss this in my office. There are some concerning findings we need to address." "No need," Holtz's voice took on a steely edge. "I'm taking my dog now, unless you'd like me to return with law enforcement." "That might be interesting." Eli spoke for the first time, his quiet voice carrying an undercurrent of authority. "I'm sure they'd be very interested in what was found inside her." Holtz's hand tightened on his leather briefcase. "I don't know what you're implying, but I suggest you all think very carefully about your next moves. Things can get unfortunate when people interfere with legitimate business operations." Clara felt a chill at the thinly veiled threat, but she stood her ground. "We're required by law to report cases of animal abuse. What was done to Z6 was cruel and illegal." "You're making serious accusations, Miss Jennings." Holt stepped closer, his presence looming. "Accusations that could have serious consequences for everyone involved." Eli shifted subtly, placing himself between Clara and Holtz. The movement wasn't lost on the kennel owner, whose eyes flicked between them calculatingly. "Fine," Holtz finally said, straightening his jacket. "Keep her for now, but this isn't over." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Oh, and Clara, do be careful on your way home tonight. The streets can be dangerous after dark." After he left, Clara released a shaky breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Z6 whined softly, and she knelt to comfort the trembling dog. "You did the right thing," Eli said quietly, his eyes still on the door. "But he's dangerous. You shouldn't be alone until this is resolved." Dr. Dreyfus slumped against the wall, looking aged. "This is bigger than us, Clara. Maybe we should just—" "No," Clara cut him off firmly, her hand buried in Z6's fur. "We can't let him have her back. You saw what they did to her, what they're using her for." Eli nodded. "I'll help. I've got some contacts who might be interested in his legitimate business operations." His expression hardened. "And I'll make sure you and Z6 stay safe." The evening shadows lengthened across the clinic's parking lot as Clara paced nervously near the back entrance. Her heart raced with every passing car, fearing Holtz's return. The weight of Z6's safety pressed heavily on her mind until she heard the soft rumble of Eli's truck pulling up to the building. Eli Turner stepped out, his military bearing evident in his careful scan of the surroundings. His usually quiet demeanor was even more focused now, purpose clear in every movement. "Coast is clear," he said in a low voice. "Got the carrier ready in the back." Clara nodded, her hands trembling slightly as she unlocked the clinic's rear door. "Z6 is still weak from surgery, but we have to move her tonight. I don't trust Holtz to stay away for long." Inside, Z6 lay in a large kennel with her 6 newborn puppies nestled against her. The German shepherd's eyes tracked their movement, but there was trust in her gaze when she saw Clara. The surgical site on her belly was still fresh, a stark reminder of the cruelty she'd endured. "Easy, girl," Clara whispered, kneeling beside the kennel. "We're going to get you somewhere safe." She gestured to the soft blankets she'd prepared. "Eli, help me move the puppies first." Together, they carefully transferred the tiny pups into a padded carrier. Z6 watched anxiously, but remained calm, seeming to understand they meant no harm. Clara's farmhouse, inherited from her grandmother, sat on 15 acres of land well outside town, the perfect refuge for their 4-legged charges. "I found something else while checking the items they removed during surgery," Clara mentioned as they worked. She pulled a small evidence bag from her pocket. Inside was what looked like a computer chip, barely larger than her thumbnail. This was mixed in with the drugs. I don't think this was just about narcotics. Eli examined the chip through the plastic, his expression grave. Military grade, high security stuff. He met Clara's eyes. Holtz isn't just some local criminal. This goes deeper. With infinite care, they helped Z6 to her feet. The dog leaned heavily against Clara's leg as they guided her to Eli's waiting truck. The night air was cool and still, but every shadow seemed to hold potential danger. "My farm has good sight lines," Clara said as they settled Z6 beside her, puppies in the truck's extended cab. "And the old barn's been fixed up. We can keep them hidden there." The drive to Clara's property took them down winding country roads, away from the city's glow. Clara kept glancing in the mirrors, watching, for headlights that might linger too long behind them. Beside her, Eli's presence was reassuring, solid and dependable like an oak tree in a storm. At the farmhouse, they worked quickly to settle Z6 and her pups in the converted barn. Clara had already prepared a space with fresh straw, warm blankets, and water. The building's old exterior belied its renovated interior, making it an ideal sanctuary. "She'll be safe here," Eli said, watching as Z6 nuzzled each puppy in turn. "But you know Holtz won't give up easily." Clara straightened from checking Z6's surgical site, determination evident in the set of her shoulders. "Then we'll have to be ready. I won't let him hurt her again." She turned to face Eli, really looking at him for the first time since this began. His quiet strength had become her anchor in this storm, and she felt grateful for his unwavering support. "Whatever this is," she gestured to the evidence bag with the chip, "it's bigger than we thought, but that just means Z6 needs us more." She reached down to stroke the dog's head, receiving a gentle lick in return. "She trusted us when she had every reason not to. We can't let her down." Eli nodded, his expression softening as he watched Clara with Z6. "We won't," he promised. "I'll set up a security system tomorrow, make sure we have early warning if anyone comes snooping." As they finished settling the dogs in for the night, Clara felt the weight of their situation settling onto her shoulders. But looking at Z6, finally safe with her puppies, she knew they'd made the right choice. Whatever Holtz's influence, whatever danger lay ahead, they would face it together. The bond between Clara and Eli had grown stronger through their shared purpose. His military precision complemented her nurturing instincts, creating a partnership that felt both natural and necessary. As they left the barn, making sure everything was secure, Clara realized that in protecting Z6, they had formed something special, an alliance built on trust, compassion, and the determination to stand against injustice, no matter the cost. Next morning, Clara sat at her kitchen table, carefully examining the items they'd recovered from Z6's surgery. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the evidence spread before her. Eli stood nearby, his military training evident in his alert posture as he kept watch. "Look at this," Clara said, holding up one of the packages they'd removed. Something about its weight felt off. "The wrapping's different from the others." She carefully peeled back the layers of protective material, revealing a hidden compartment within. Eli moved closer, his expression focused. "Hold on," he said, reaching for the package. With precise movements, he extracted what looked like a thin strip of film, no bigger than a bookmark. "This is microfilm. Old-school spy stuff, but effective. Hard to detect, easy to transport." Clara's hands trembled slightly as she held the film up to the light. "There are images, documents." The tiny text was barely visible to the naked eye. "We need to enlarge this," Eli said, already reaching for his laptop. "I've got a portable scanner that can handle microfilm, military surplus." He worked quickly, setting up the equipment with practiced ease. As the first images appeared on the screen, Clara's breath caught in her throat. "These are ledgers," she whispered, leaning closer. "Names, dates, amounts, and look at these kennel records. The documents revealed a complex network of operations. Holtz's legitimate-seeming dog breeding business was just a front for something far more sinister. The ledgers showed connections to arms trafficking, with the kennels serving as a cover for moving weapons across state lines. These shipping manifests, Eli pointed to a section of the screen, they're coded, but I recognize the pattern. These aren't just about moving dogs, they're tracking weapons shipments. His jaw tightened. High-grade military hardware stolen from bases across 3 states. Clara's hands clenched into fists. He's been using innocent animals as cover for all this. How many other dogs has he hurt like Z6? The thought made her sick to her stomach. And look at these names. Some of them are local officials, police captains, county commissioners. That's how he's been operating so freely, Eli said grimly. He's got protection, corruption running deep through the system. He placed a steady hand on Clara's shoulder. This is bigger than we imagined. More dangerous, too. Clara stood up, pacing the kitchen. Her anger warred with her common sense. We can't just sit on this information. Every day this continues is another day animals and people get hurt. We need to be smart about this, Eli cautioned, but his eyes held admiration for her determination. These people, they won't hesitate to silence anyone who threatens their operation. Clara turned to face him, noting how the morning light caught the flecks of gold in his hazel eyes. Despite the seriousness of the situation, she felt a flutter in her chest at his proximity. What do you suggest? We document everything, he said, moving closer. Build a case that's too solid to ignore. Then we take it to federal authorities. Bypass the local corruption entirely. Their shared mission had created something between them, a connection built on trust and shared values. Clara found herself drawing strength from his steady presence, even as the magnitude of their discovery threatened to overwhelm her. When I first found Z6, Clara said softly, I just wanted to help one dog. Now we're uncovering an entire criminal empire. She looked out the window toward the barn where Z6 and her puppies rested safely. But seeing what they did to her, I can't walk away from this. Eli's hand found hers, giving it a reassuring squeeze. You don't have to. We're in this together. The touch lingered, speaking of something more than just alliance. They spent the next hour carefully documenting every detail from the microfilm, creating backup copies of the evidence. The ledgers painted a disturbing picture. Holtz's operation spanned multiple states, using seemingly legitimate dog breeding as cover for moving weapons and laundering money. Clara's veterinary knowledge proved invaluable as she identified patterns. In the kennel records, dates and locations that corresponded with major weapons shipments. Eli's military background helped decode the more technical aspects of the arms trafficking operation. Working side by side, they fell into a natural rhythm. Clara couldn't help but notice how Eli's serious expression softened when their eyes met, or how his hand would brush against hers as they passed documents back and forth. Even in the midst of unraveling this dangerous conspiracy, something warm and unexpected was growing between them. The evidence mounted. Shipping manifests disguised as breeding records, financial transactions hidden in veterinary bills, and a network of corrupted officials who turned blind eyes in exchange for payoffs. Each new discovery strengthened their resolve to bring down Holtz's operation, while also highlighting the danger they faced. The night settled over Clara's farmhouse like a heavy blanket. She lay awake in bed, listening to the gentle patter of rain against the windows. Down the hall, Z6 and her puppies slept soundly in their makeshift nursery. The events of the past. Few days weighed heavily on her mind, making sleep elusive. A floorboard creaked downstairs. Clara sat up, instantly alert. That wasn't the normal settling of an old house. Another soft sound followed. The unmistakable click of the back door's lock being picked. Her heart hammering, Clara reached for her phone. Her trembling fingers had just dialed Eli's number when she heard multiple sets of footsteps entering her home. The call connected. "Someone's in the house," she whispered urgently. "I'm 5 minutes away." Eli's voice was tense. "Hide, now!" Clara crept to the nursery where Z6 lay with her puppies. The German Shepherd's ears were already perked, her body tense but silent. Clara could hear the intruders moving methodically through the first floor. Heavy footsteps started up the stairs. Z6 rose, positioning herself between her puppies and the door. Clara's hands shook as she quickly gathered the smallest pups into a laundry basket ready to run if needed. The door burst open. 2 masked men in dark clothing filled the doorway. Z6 lunged forward with a savage growl, but one of the men was ready with a catch-pole. The loop caught around her neck, yanking her sideways. "No!" Clara screamed, throwing herself forward to protect the dog. A third man grabbed her from behind, his gloved hand clamping over her mouth. The window exploded inward in a shower of glass. Eli rolled through the opening, immediately engaging the nearest attacker. His military training was evident in every precise movement as he drove his fist into the man's solar plexus. Clara bit down hard on her captor's hand. As he cursed and loosened his grip, she drove her elbow back into his ribs. She scrambled toward Z6, who was still fighting against the catch-pole. The room erupted into chaos. Eli grappled with 2 of the men while Clara worked to free Z6. The German Shepherd's protective instincts were in full force. The moment Clara got the loop off. "Her neck!" She launched herself at the nearest attacker. "Get the dogs out!" Eli shouted, blocking a punch and retaliating with a swift combination that sent his opponent staggering. Clara scooped up the basket of puppies. Z6 broke free from the melee and rushed to her side, herding her toward the door. Behind them, the sound of fighting continued. They made it halfway down the stairs when Clara smelled it. Smoke. Orange flames were already licking up the walls of her living room. More men must have been downstairs setting the fire while the others attacked above. "Eli!" she screamed. "Fire!" The smoke was getting thicker. Clara covered the puppies with a blanket and rushed for the front door, Z6 right beside her. They burst out into the rain-soaked night just as Eli came running down the stairs, pursuing the retreating attackers. "They're getting away!" he panted, blood running from a cut above his eye. "Let them!" Clara said, watching in horror as flames engulfed her home. "We need to get further back." They retreated to the barn, watching helplessly as the fire spread. Even with the rain, the old farmhouse went up like tinder. By the time the fire department arrived, it was too late to save anything. Clara stood in the mud, soaked to the skin, clutching the basket of whimpering puppies. Z6 pressed against her leg, both protector and protected. The German Shepherd's fur was singed in places, but she was otherwise unharmed. "This is my fault," Clara whispered, watching her home burn. "Everything I own was in there. All my mother's pictures." Her voice broke. "I should have just given them what they wanted." Eli turned to her, his expression fierce despite his injuries. "No. This is Holtz showing his true colors. He's a coward who burns down homes and hurts animals. You stood up to him because it was right. And look what it got me." Clara sank to her knees in the wet grass. "I'm homeless. They could have killed us all. The puppies." She hugged the basket closer, tears mixing with the rain on her face. "But they didn't," Eli said firmly, kneeling beside her. "We're alive. We have the evidence. And now we have proof of how far Holtz will go. Attempted murder, arson. He's desperate, which means we're close to bringing him down." Clara looked at the dying flames that had devoured her home, her possessions, her sense of security. The weight of consequences crashed over her, not just for herself, but for everyone involved. Z6 nuzzled her hand, and one of the puppies let out a tiny whimper. "Where do we go from here?" she asked, her voice small against the sound of crackling flames and rain. "My place," Eli said without hesitation. "It's secure, and there's plenty of room for the dogs. We'll regroup." Contact the authorities with what we know. Clara nodded numbly, but doubt gnawed at her heart. She had taken a stand against cruelty and corruption, but at what cost? Her home was gone, reduced to smoldering ruins. The life she had built for herself lay in ashes, and the threat of Holtz's retaliation still loomed over them all, as fire. Trucks doused the last of the flames. Clara sat in the rain, surrounded by the unlikely family she had gathered. A protective ex-Marine, a brave German shepherd, and 6 tiny puppies who had no idea how close they had come to tragedy. She had never felt more vulnerable or more uncertain of the path ahead. Eli helped Clara to her feet as the last embers of her farmhouse died in the rain. She was shivering, as much from shock as from the cold. Z6 stayed close, her warm presence a small comfort against the devastating loss. "Come on," Eli said gently. "Let's get everyone warm and dry. Then we can think clearly about our next steps." At Eli's house, a modest but well-maintained ranch-style home, Clara wrapped herself in a borrowed blanket while Eli made hot coffee. Z6 and her puppies settled into a makeshift bed of soft towels in the spare room. "I know it feels like everything's falling apart," Eli said, handing her a steaming mug. "But we have something Holtz doesn't know about. The microfilm ledger. That's why he's so desperate." Clara cupped the warm mug in her trembling hands. "What if he comes after us again? What if next time—" "No," Eli cut her off firmly. His military bearing showed as he squared his shoulders. "We're not playing defense anymore. I've seen enough combat to know when it's time to change tactics." He spread a map across his kitchen table, marking locations with precise movements that spoke of years of strategic planning. "We have evidence of arms trafficking, drug smuggling, and now attempted murder. The federal authorities will have to act." Clara watched him work, drawing strength from his quiet confidence. "You really think we can take him down?" "I know we can," Eli said, his eyes meeting hers with unwavering certainty. "But first, we need to get that ledger to the right people." The next morning, they drove to the federal building in Columbus. Clara clutched the package containing the microfilm, while Eli scanned their surroundings with practiced vigilance. Inside, they met with 2 serious-faced agents who listened intently to their story. "This is substantial evidence," Agent Martinez said, examining the microfilm. "But Holtz is well connected. We'll need more than just these records to make charges." "Stick. What if we could get him to reveal himself?" Eli suggested, leaning forward. "Stage a transfer that would draw him out?" Agent Chen raised an eyebrow. "You're proposing to act as bait?" "We already are," Clara said, finding her voice. The fear was still there, but now it fueled her determination rather than paralyzing her. "He burned down my home. He won't stop coming after us. At least this way, we choose the battlefield." The agents exchanged looks. "It's risky," Martinez warned. "But if you're willing to help set up a sting operation, we could coordinate with local law enforcement." Over the next hour, they outlined a plan. They would leak information about Z6 being moved to a new location, making sure it reached Holtz's network. The transfer would take place at an abandoned warehouse where federal agents could monitor everything. "You've thought like a tactical officer before?" Agent Chen remarked to Eli. 3 tours with the Marines," Eli replied simply. "I know how to plan an ambush." Back at Eli's house, Clara sat with Z6, scratching behind her ears. The German shepherd's steady presence had become a symbol of everything they were fighting for. The puppies tumbled around them, growing stronger each day. "Having second thoughts?" Eli asked, sitting beside her. Clara shook her head. "Actually, no. For the first time since this started, I feel like we're not just reacting. We're fighting back." "That's the Clara I've come to know," Eli said softly. His hand found hers, warm and reassuring. The one who wouldn't give up on Z6, who saw something wrong and decided to make it right. They spent the rest of the day going over the plan, marking exit routes and contingencies. Eli's military precision balanced Clara's knowledge of Holtz's operation. Together they created a trap that would be hard to escape. "We'll need to be perfect," Clara said, studying the warehouse layout. "Holtz isn't stupid. He'll be suspicious. That's why we'll make it look just messy enough to be believable," Eli explained. "The best traps are the ones that don't look like traps at all." As evening fell, Clara watched Z6 nursing her puppies. The sight filled her with renewed purpose. Her home might be gone, but she had found something stronger. The courage to stand against cruelty, and people willing to stand with her. "Tomorrow we start pushing back," she said quietly. Z6 looked up at her with trusting eyes, and Clara felt her resolve harden like steel. Holtz had taken her home, but he had failed to break her spirit. Now it was time to show him exactly what that spirit could do. Dark clouds rolled overhead as Clara pulled into Holtz's private kennel compound, her hands tight on the steering wheel. Thunder rumbled in the distance, matching the tension in her chest. Z6 sat alertly in the passenger seat, her ears pricked forward. The sprawling property looked deceptively peaceful, manicured lawns surrounding a cluster of well-maintained buildings. But Clara knew the horror that lay beneath the polished surface. She could almost feel the suffering of countless dogs who had been used as unwilling vessels in Holtz's cruel operation. Rain began to fall as she parked near the main barn, fat drops hitting the windshield. According to plan, she was alone, apparently vulnerable. But hidden cameras and microphones had been carefully placed around the property earlier that day, and tactical teams waited just beyond the perimeter. Raymond Holtz emerged from the barn, impeccably dressed despite the weather. His smile was sharp as broken glass. "Miss Jennings," he called out pleasantly. "I'm so glad you finally came to your senses." Clara stepped out of the car, keeping her movements measured and calm despite her racing heart. Z6 followed, staying close to her side. "I just want this to be over," Clara said, making her voice sound defeated. "After what happened to my house, I can't keep fighting you." Lightning flashed, illuminating Holtz's satisfied expression. "Smart girl. Though I must say, I'm surprised you came alone." "Who else would come?" Clara asked bitterly. "Dr. Dreyfus won't help. Eli left town after the attack." Holtz approached slowly, rain darkening his expensive suit. "And the evidence you stole from my property?" "In my car," Clara said, "along with Z6's puppies. Everything you want, in exchange for leaving me alone." The wind picked up, driving the rain sideways. Z6 growled softly as Holtz drew closer, but Clara quieted her with a gentle touch. Something shifted in Holtz's eyes, a flicker of suspicion. He glanced around the property, studying the shadows. "Let's continue this discussion inside," he said, gesturing toward the barn. "No sense getting soaked." Clara hesitated, then nodded. This was part of the plan. Get him talking somewhere the microphones could clearly record his confession. She followed him toward the barn, Z6 padding silently beside her. The barn doors creaked as they entered. The space was vast and dimly lit, with rows of empty kennels lining the walls. The rain drummed against the metal roof, creating an ominous rhythm. "Show me," Holtz demanded, holding out his hand. Clara reached into her pocket and withdrew a USB drive, a decoy containing only portions of the evidence. But before she could hand it over, Holtz's expression changed. "You know," he said softly, "it's interesting. Earlier today I noticed some unusual activity around my property. Very subtle, professional even, almost like law enforcement surveillance." Clara's blood ran cold. Holtz moved with shocking speed, grabbing her arm and twisting it behind her back. Z6 lunged forward with a snarl, but Holtz kicked the barn door shut with a resounding bang. "Did you really think I wouldn't have my own surveillance?" he hissed in her ear. "That I wouldn't recognize a setup?" Z6 circled them, teeth bared, but Clara's position made it impossible for the dog to attack without risking her. Holtz backed them toward a storage room, his grip brutally tight. "Your friend Eli isn't as far away as you claimed, is he?" Holtz's voice was deadly calm. "No matter. By the time anyone reaches us, it'll be too late." He shoved Clara into the storage room, Z6 rushing in after her. The door slammed shut and Clara heard the heavy slide of a bolt being thrown. "Consider this karma for the trouble you've caused," Holtz called through the door. There was a sound of liquid splashing, then the sharp smell of gasoline filled the air. Clara's heart pounded as she heard the strike of a match. Smoke began seeping under the door almost immediately. "No!" she screamed, throwing herself against the door. But it was solid wood and wouldn't budge. The fire spread quickly, feeding on the dry hay and wood. Smoke filled the small space, making Clara cough. Z6 whined, pressing against her legs. Outside, she could hear the sounds of struggle, shouts, and the impact of fists. Eli had arrived right on schedule, but now he was facing Holtz alone. The fight moved closer to the storage room door. Clara heard Eli's voice tight with fury. "It's over, Holtz!" "Nothing's over," Holtz snarled back. There was a crash, then the sickening sound of flesh hitting flesh. The smoke was getting thicker. Clara pulled her shirt over her nose and mouth, dropping low to the ground. Z6 crouched beside her, both of them gasping in the increasingly toxic air. The battle outside continued. Through the door, Clara could hear Eli and Holtz trading brutal blows. Something shattered. Someone cried out in pain. Then came the sound she'd been praying for, sirens growing closer. The tactical teams were moving in. "Federal agents!" Multiple voices shouted. "Raymond Holtz, you're under arrest!" There was a final violent scuffle. Clara heard Holtz roar in rage, followed by the distinct sound of handcuffs clicking shut. "Clara!" Eli's voice was hoarse with smoke and exertion. "Where are you?" "Here," she called back, coughing. "In the storage room! Hurry!" The bolt scraped. Back, and the door flew open. Eli stood there, blood running from a cut above his eye, but very much alive. Behind him, Clara could see agents swarming the barn containing both Holtz and the spreading fire. "Come on," Eli urged, reaching for her hand. "Let's get you out of here," Clara stumbled out, Z6 right behind her. Through the smoke and chaos, she saw Holtz being led away in handcuffs, his perfect suit torn and dirty, his face twisted with rage. Emergency vehicles were arriving, their lights pulsing through the rain. As paramedics rushed to check them for injuries, Clara watched Holtz being placed in a police car. Their eyes met for a moment through the window. She saw nothing but cold fury in his gaze, but Clara didn't look away. She stood straight, one hand buried in Z6's fur, the other clasped tightly in Eli's. They had won. Holtz's empire of cruelty was finally crumbling, and justice would be served. In the days following Holtz's arrest, the full scope of his criminal empire came to light. Federal investigators uncovered a network spanning 3 states, with dozens of kennels used as fronts for smuggling operations. The evidence Clara and Eli had provided proved crucial, leading to multiple arrests and the rescue of other dogs, who had suffered like Z6. Clara stood in the sunshine outside the newly rebuilt clinic, watching Z6 play with her puppies in the fenced yard. The German Shepherd's transformation was remarkable. Her coat now gleamed with health, and her eyes shone with trust instead of fear. All 6 of her puppies had grown into sturdy, playful balls of fur, their earlier trauma forgotten in the joy of simply being dogs. "There's my heroes," Eli said, coming up beside her. He slipped an arm around her waist, and Clara leaned into his warmth. "I still can't believe how much has changed," she said softly. "Sometimes I wake up thinking it was all a dream, but it wasn't a dream. The newspaper articles and official commendations proved that. Clara had been recognized by both law enforcement and animal welfare organizations for her role in exposing Holtz's operation. Dr. Dreyfus had even promoted her to head veterinary nurse, acknowledging that her instincts had been right all along. "You know what I can't believe?" Eli said, watching one of the puppies tackle its sibling in an exuberant wrestling match. "That you ever doubted yourself. You were amazing from the start." Clara smiled, remembering how uncertain she'd felt that first night with Z6. "I just knew I had to help her. Everything else, I was terrified most of the time." "That's what makes it brave," Eli replied. "Doing the right thing even when you're scared." The sound of a car pulling up drew their attention. A federal agent stepped out carrying a folder. "Miss Jennings," she called, walking over. "I thought you'd want to know. Raymond Holtz was sentenced this morning. 20 years, no possibility of early parole. The judge was particularly moved by the evidence of animal cruelty." Clara felt a weight lift from her shoulders. "Thank you for letting me know. What about the other dogs? All placed in rehabilitation programs or adopted by carefully screened families," the agent assured her. "Your testimony about Z6's recovery was instrumental in securing funding for their care." After the agent left, Clara knelt beside Z6, who immediately pressed against her side. The dog's scars were still visible, but they told a story of survival now, not victimization. "I've been thinking," Eli said, joining them on the ground. One of the puppies immediately climbed into his lap. "My lease is up next month." Clara's heart skipped. Since her farmhouse burned down, she'd been living in a small cottage on the clinic's property. It was cozy, but sometimes felt empty when Eli wasn't there. "Is that so?" she said, trying to keep her voice casual. "Mm-hmm." He scratched behind the puppy's ears. "Seems silly to pay rent when I spend most of my time here anyway. If you're interested in a roommate, and maybe something more." Clara turned to face him fully. In his eyes, she saw the same quiet strength and unwavering loyalty that had supported her through their darkest moments. "I'm definitely interested," she said softly. Z6 wagged her tail, looking between them as if she approved of this development. Her puppies tumbled around them, secure in the knowledge that they were safe and loved. Clara reached for Eli's hand, marveling at how complete her life felt now. She had found her voice, standing up against cruelty and injustice. She had discovered reserves of courage she never knew she possessed. And most importantly, she had built a family, not just with Eli, but with Z6 and all the other animals who needed her care. "Welcome home," she whispered, and sealed the moment with a kiss. If today's story echoed in your heart, I hope you'll stay. Subscribe, and I'll be here again tomorrow, with another quiet story full of the kind of love that lasts.